Welcome to your deep dive. Today we're stepping back in time to ancient China during the spring and autumn period.
A fascinating and turbulent era, wouldn't you say? Imagine a map constantly being redrawn, alliances shifting like desert sands, and every ruler vying for dominance. That was the reality of the spring and autumn period, roughly 771 to 476 BCE.
It sounds intense. No wonder it's called the spring and autumn period. Sounds like things could change with the seasons. So who were the major players in this game of power?
This period saw the rise of individuals we call hegemons, powerful leaders who, through a mix of military might, diplomacy, and strategic cunning, held sway over other states. Think of them as the influencers of their day, but instead of sponsored content, they had armies and alliances. Now there's always debate about who truly deserves a spot in the top 5 hegemon list.
A little ancient Chinese history drama. I love it.
Our deep dive today focuses on a figure who, in one version of history, is considered the second hegemon, Duke Xiang of Song.
Duke Xiang of Song setting. He's stepping into some pretty big shoes, especially following someone like Duke Huan of Qi, right?
Precisely. Duke Huan was renowned for his political acumen and military prowess. Following him would be a challenge for any leader. But Duke Xiang's path to power is particularly intriguing. You see, he wasn't initially in line for the throne.
Wait, really? What happened?
Duke Xiang was actually the eldest son, seemingly destined to rule. However, his father favored a younger brother. Now, in many kingdoms, this would be a recipe for a bloody coup, a battle for the throne. But Duke Xiang reacted unexpectedly. He offered to step aside, claiming he wanted to prioritize his father's happiness.
Wow, talk about playing the long game. Most people will be sharpening their swords, not making selfless gestures.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. Duke Xiang's brother, instead of seizing this opportunity, also declined the throne. He left Song altogether, seemingly to prevent any conflict or appearance of impropriety. This act of brotherly deference, whether genuine or calculated, had significant ripple effects.
I can only imagine. It's not every day you see that kind of humility, especially when a kingdom is at stake.
Exactly. This act immediately elevated the reputation of the Song state. They became known for their virtue, their commitment to familial piety, which, by the way, was paramount in ancient China, and their unwillingness to engage in the typical power struggles of the era. This sent a powerful message throughout the kingdoms.
So they're basically the nice guys of ancient China.
You could say that. And this nice guy image actually worked in their favor. Their actions deeply impressed Duke Huan of Qi, the reigning hegemon at the time.
Ah, so this is where Duke Xiang starts making his move.
Precisely. Duke Xiang, recognizing the importance of aligning himself with the most powerful figure of the time, cultivates a close relationship with Duke Huan. He becomes a loyal follower, attending all the assemblies, supporting Duke Huan's decisions, and appearing content to be the dutiful, less ambitious ally.
But I'm sensing a but coming. Something tells me Duke Xiang wasn't just there to make friends and drink tea.
You're absolutely right. Beneath the surface, Duke Xiang was a very shrewd observer. He was learning from the best, absorbing Duke Huan's strategies, understanding the nuances of power, and patiently waiting for his moment to seize control.
Okay, so we've got a cunning mind being honed in the background, a kingdom with a surprising reputation for virtue, and the most powerful man in ancient China nearing the end of his reign. What could possibly happen next?
Well, as Duke Huan's health fades, he makes a deathbed request of Duke Xiang, a request that will draw Duke Xiang deeper into the web of alliances and betrayals that define this era.
I knew it! This is where things start to get really interesting. All right, so we left off with Duke Huan, the reigning hegemon, on his deathbed. He's got Duke Xiang, our ambitious friend, waiting by his side. What was this fateful request?
Duke Huan, ever the shrewd politician, was worried about what would happen after his death. You see, he had a favorite son, Prince Zhao, whom he wanted to succeed him. But as was often the case in this era, succession didn't always follow a neat and orderly path.
Right, because powerful families, multiple sons vying for power, it's a recipe for, shall we say, some family disagreements.
Precisely. And those disagreements could get quite brutal. Duke Huan, fearing his other sons might try to usurp Prince Zhao's rightful claim, asks Duke Xiang for a binding promise to protect Prince Zhao and ensure his ascension to the throne.
And Duke Xiang agrees, even though it sounds like this could drag him into a whole hornet's nest of Qi family drama.
He does. Now, whether this was purely out of loyalty to Duke Huan, a strategic move to gain influence within the powerful Qi state, or perhaps a bit of both, is still debated by historians. Regardless, Duke Xiang had just stepped onto a very slippery slope.
Because I'm guessing things didn't go quite as smoothly as planned.
Predictably, chaos erupted the moment Duke Huan breathed his last breath. Prince Zhao's brothers, as if waiting for a starting signal, immediately went to war with each other, each one determined to seize the throne. Prince Zhao, outmaneuvered and facing likely death, is forced to flee Qi.
Talk about a tough first week on the job. So where does Prince Zhao run for help?
He flees to Song, seeking refuge with none other than Duke Xiang, reminding him of his promise to Duke Huan.
Oh boy, I bet Duke Xiang was thrilled about that little visit. It's not every day you get a deposed prince showing up on your doorstep asking you to risk your neck in a succession war.
Indeed. And Duke Xiang, ever the pragmatist, hesitated. He knew that intervening in Qi's internal struggles was a risky proposition. It would mean committing Song's resources and potentially alienating powerful factions within Qi.
So what changed his mind? Why risk it all for a prince who at that moment seemed more like a liability than an asset?
Prince Zhao, recognizing Duke Xiang's reluctance, made him an offer he couldn't refuse. He promised that if Duke Xiang helped him reclaim the throne of Qi, he would in return support Duke Xiang's bid to become the next hegemon.
Ah, so there's the ambition we were waiting for. This deal has win-win written all over it, at least on paper.
On paper, it seemed like a brilliant move. And surprisingly, despite gathering only a small and rather unenthusiastic force, Duke Xiang's gamble paid off.
Hold on. He goes to war with minimal support. Against a kingdom like Qi, even one weakened by infighting. That sounds incredibly risky even for him.
It was a gamble, no doubt. But remember, Qi was deeply divided at this point. The people were exhausted from the constant power struggles and yearned for stability. Many saw Prince Zhao with Duke Xiang's backing as their best hope for peace. So Duke Xiang marched into Qi, faced minimal resistance, and easily reinstated Prince Zhao to the throne. Just like that, he was a kingmaker.
Wow, what a power move. He must have felt invincible. So Prince Zhao, true to his word, throws a big party to declare Duke Xiang as the new hegemon, right?
You would think so, wouldn't you? A grand celebration, all the rulers gathered, toasts being made. But this is the spring and autumn period. And in this era, power vacuums were always filled, often by those you least expected.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Who crashes this party?
Enter King Xiang of Qi, a ruler known for his boldness and his rather flexible interpretation of titles. He arrives at the assembly not as a guest, but as a contender ready to claim the mantle of leadership for himself.
Okay, this is wild. So we've got Duke Xiang, fresh off his victory in Qi, probably expecting a hero's welcome at this assembly. But instead, King Xiang of Qi decides to make it interesting. What happens when these two ambitious rulers collide?
It's a fascinating clash of styles and strategies. Duke Xiang, perhaps a bit blinded by his recent success, tries to play it cool. He subtly suggests that whoever holds the highest rank should naturally lead the alliance. His thinking was that everyone would acknowledge him as the obvious choice.
Because he just helped install the new leader of Qi, everyone should fall in line, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Duke Xiang underestimated his opponent. You see, King Xiang, though, technically a Viscount at the time, had already declared himself king. A bold move challenging the existing power structure.
So he's already breaking the rules before the game even starts.
Precisely. King Xiang saw himself as equal to the Son of Heaven himself, which meant that in his eyes, his rank was at least on par with Duke Xiang's, if not higher.
So while Duke Xiang is trying to be subtle, King Xiang is playing chess on a whole other level.
You could say that while Duke Xiang is busy hinting at his worthiness, King Xiang seizes the opportunity. He confidently claims the leadership seat for himself, catching everyone, including Duke Xiang, completely off guard. And to add insult to injury, we learn later that King Xiang has strategically positioned his own soldiers at the assembly hidden, but ready should things go sideways.
He came prepared. Talk about adding a whole new level of awkward to the situation. Duke Xiang must have been fuming.
Absolutely. He was humiliated, outsmarted, and to make matters worse, he's captured by King Xiang's men right there at the assembly.
Wow, talk about your worst nightmares as a ruler. But if King Xiang was so ruthless, why not just keep Duke Xiang locked up? Why let him go free?
It seems King Xiang viewed him as more of a nuisance than a true threat. Someone who talked a big game, but after this display lacked the strategic depth to be truly dangerous. Or perhaps he wanted to send a message, a warning to other rulers about challenging his authority.
So Duke Xiang is allowed to slink back to Song defeated and humiliated. You'd think this would be a good time for a little introspection, a reevaluation of his life choices.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But that's not our Duke Xiang. Instead, he becomes fixated on revenge.
Oh no, here we go again.
Consumed by anger and a thirst for payback, he sets his sights on the state of Zhang.
Zhang, why Zhang? What did they do?
Zhang was a smaller, weaker state allied with Qi. Duke Xiang, in his infinite wisdom, decides that instead of confronting Qi directly, he would attack their ally. It was a miscalculation of epic proportions.
So he's picking on the little guy, Classic case of misplaced aggression.
Exactly. He believed he could punish Zhang and indirectly strike back at King Cheng, showing him who was boss. But all he really did was hand King Cheng the perfect excuse to retaliate with full force.
Because, of course, King Cheng doesn't just sit back and watch this happen.
Absolutely not. He immediately mobilizes his army and marches on Song. Officially, it's to protect their ally Zhang. But really, it's about teaching Duke Xiang a lesson he won't soon forget.
So we have a showdown brewing. Two armies, one led by a ruler fueled by wounded pride and another by calculated strategy. What happens next?
The two forces meet at a place called Hongshui. And this is where Duke Xiang's commitment to honorable warfare, something that had up to this point been perceived as a virtue, becomes his undoing.
Wait, honorable warfare in the middle of a battle? What does that even mean?
As a Chu army is crossing a river, Duke Xiang's advisors urge him to strike. It's a classic military tactic. Hit your enemy when they're vulnerable, disrupt their formations. A golden opportunity. But Duke Xiang, he refuses. He declares that attacking an enemy before they've had a chance to properly form their ranks would be dishonorable, ungentlemanly even.
He's kidding, right? He's prioritizing chivalry over the lives of his soldiers and the fate of his kingdom.
That, in a nutshell, sums up Duke Xiang's reign. Full of good intentions, noble ideals, but ultimately disastrous decisions. The result, as you can imagine, was a catastrophic defeat for Song. Their forces are decimated, their land ravaged, and Duke Xiang himself is badly wounded.
This is heartbreaking, even knowing how it ends. You have to wonder, did he ever have any regrets, any second thoughts about his approach to leadership?
That, my friend, is a question that continues to fascinate historians. Duke Xiang died a year later, likely from complications from those wounds he received at Hongshui. His legacy remains a subject of debate. Was he a noble leader, unwavering in his principles, even when they proved to be his downfall? Or was he a fool blinded by his own righteousness who led his state to ruin?
I guess it goes to show that leadership is more than just good intentions or a strict adherence to ideals. It's about knowing when to stand firm and when to adapt, when to fight, and when to negotiate. It's about finding that balance between principle and pragmatism, between holding on to your beliefs and knowing when to make a strategic exception.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Duke Xiang's story, though ultimately a tragedy, serves as a valuable lesson for anyone in a position of power. Sometimes the most righteous path can lead to the most devastating consequences.
Duke Xiang of Song, a ruler who reminds us that even with the best of intentions, a lack of pragmatism and a healthy dose of real politics can lead to ruin.